Okay, so we, welcome, nice to see everybody.
Thank you.
And we are gonna have a roll call. I am here, obviously, Laura,
Present.
Rich,
Yes.
and Chairman Heiner.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so we have, with the meeting having come to order, we have a bunch of action discussion items. I can't believe I got this book. Did you see this book they gave me?
Oh, it's fabulous. So I haven't,
Yeah, I
a
know.
hot seat, girl.
I know, really. So I am gonna just turn it over to Donna.
Well, it's your all's favorite part of the agenda. Forget about everything to do with, curriculum, accountability, it's DFP. So,
Everybody's getting them in.
everybody's gonna be in, that's exactly it. And the first one you have on your agenda is an amended DFP for Jefferson County. And of course, Jefferson County has a huge DFP because they have a lot of schools. But basically what they were amending the plan for was to add a couple new elementary schools and a new middle school, which is good. This is the first time we've seen Jefferson come in with new schools in a long time.
Okay.
So that was really good.
Wait a minute, I'm looking for that here on the
Yeah.
agenda.
That's the
Jefferson?
second one.
So that's the second
Did I,
agenda
I'm
item.
sorry. I'm so used to doing the amended ones first.
We did the new
Let's
ones
tell it, we're
first.
good, go for it. We can,
Just
you're-
keep on going.
Keep going.
You'll let me
Yeah.
get out of order. Thank you very much. That way you don't have to hear me repeat it again. That's smart. But anyway, so, they went through the process they should. They convened their LBC and, did the appropriate meetings and the hearings and the board. There was one board member that did vote against the amended DFP, and that was, Mr. Brady.
Out of how many board members?
They have
Shocking.
seven?
Seven.
And he didn't object to what was on the DFP, but he really wanted to add yet another new replacement school. So it's just that he wanted more on here. So that's just a clarification point. He supported what was on there, he just wanted more, so.
Well, I think his position is they're spending more on fixing up that they ought to be spending on
On
new,
new.
and they're just throwing good money after bad is, I think, his line of thinking, and that's, I think, an item for discussion here as well.
Except we don't have really an opinion on that, do we?
I mean, you can have an opinion on it,
Yeah,
but it's not
yeah,
really.
we have to approve it or not.
Well, we're approving process,
They call it the
not
process
content.
they had. Mhm.
Right.
We really don't, you're not required, which is, from your standpoint, to approve projects that are on here, right? That's what the local.
Their district.
Right.
They're talking about like $20 million for new HVAC units, and you could build most of the school for that, and, you know, some
So
of
that's
the
for
stuff.
multiple.
There's a lot of concern about the money they're spending in Jefferson County on the repairs, quite a bit.
We just don't have the authority to tell them what to spend their money on, we just have to hold them accountable to follow the process. It's the main problem.
So the appropriate place to go and voice those concerns are, of course, to the local board to influence and impact what their local plan comes out as. By the time it gets to us and has been through that public comment period and the creation of their plan, then it gets to us and we look at to make sure they followed all the steps to provide that public notice. I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying, I'm just saying we don't really have the authority. We look at to make sure they followed all the process and have done what they were supposed to do. So I'm not disagreeing with your comments, I'm just saying that's kind of the purview of the department and the board.
So which ones were actually the additions, I'm sorry, I know you.
They will be the ones that are in bold.
Bold underline, got it.
Is Jefferson supposed to be in this batch?
I got you out of order, Kathy. There's two batches. There's one with just one amendment, and then there's a batch of 22.
Okay.
So Jefferson's probably behind your batch of 22. You should have one.
This
It was
one,
behind that
under
blue
here?
tab.
There you are.
Yeah.
Yep, there it is, there she was. Okay, thank you.
And just one question based on our call about is, in the staff note, I think we talked about in the future, just laying out exactly what the board's authority is.
Yeah, we're gonna do that going
In the
forward.
future, you know, it'll
Yeah.
just say, you have the authority to yes or no on process, or
Yes.
just make it crystal clear what we can.
And Deanna,
Yeah,
can
because
send
there's
you
two
that,
sides of
'cause,
that, right? If we approve it and people are like, have you lost your mind?
Yeah, Matt's
Just
already-
be real clear about
Right.
the authority.
And you're right about that, because And like in this case, and what's written into the regulation is that, you know, they do have a process they have to follow. It lays out what we will have, you know, like this summary of the changes they're going to make, a public hearing, certain documents. And then it goes on to say that the board will approve the DFP based upon the commissioner's recommendation to approve. So in other words, with the commissioner recommending approval, then it's expected that the board would follow along. But that, you're right, we can put that in
I'd like to
statute.
get more, to back to statute, in other words, what the board authority, I mean, yeah, the commissioners is a recommendation, it doesn't mean we.
Right.
Yeah, and that's in a regulation too, so
Okay, yeah.
that could be changed.
Oh, well, okay.
A regulation, you know, is adopted and passed through this board. So if there's regulations in place right now, of course, it's the purview of the board to change those,
I just like
as
sort
opposed
of
to the statute.
crystal clarity on exactly what the board can
Mhm.
do.
Of course, I mean, we're building a new elementary school here for 16.9 million, and they're spending 20 million on an HVAC.
It's more than the HVAC goes, right, which one you looking at?
Well, yeah, if you add everything else in, it's
Right.
far more than 20 million. I'm just, is it appropriate for us to raise concern about this?
Of course, you can raise concern to the superintendent and all the planning committee. I mean, I think that's something, of course, you can do.
Question is whether it can be done now or not.
We're just about process here, not the merits of the project.
That's exactly right. You go to the district and come to a screeching halt. Okay, so, given, do you have any other questions? So then I will entertain a motion to approve the DNP for Jefferson County School District.
Chair, wondering if, I give council just a minute or two to provide that
Do you wanna
clarity.
table this
Yeah.
and then come back to it? We could go through the rest of the agenda and then look at it at the end.
Yeah.
Okay, consider it tabled. So you wanna,
Does that affect the other DFPs too?
Well, let's just table it for Jefferson County
County.
and then let's
Just
go
move
to
on.
the new
Okay.
DFPs and see if we have any questions there.
Go back to
Okay.
First item then.
Yeah, go back to you.
In your packet, you have a staff note with, attached to 22 new DFPs. DFPs are for Breckinridge County, Butler County, Cloverport Independent, Covington Independent, Dawson Springs Independent, Fairview Independent, Henry County, Johnson County, Lewis County, Logan County, Madison County, McGoffin County, Murray Independent, Nelson County, Paintsville Independent, Powell County, Simpson County, Taylor County, Trick County, Union County, Wayne County, and Webster County School Districts. In each case, the district did as required by the statute and the regulation, and convened an LPC who reviewed the facilities and made recommendations to the board and held public hearing as required. My staff reviews the draft DFPs as they come in to make sure they're in conformance with the model space requirements, and found that they were in compliance and they followed the process they should. In all cases, the LPCs all voted 100% in favor, as did the boards, and there were no substantial comments at the public hearings. So staff is recommending approval of these 22 DFPs.
Also move.
I'll second.
okay, any further discussion at all? Okay, I will call for a vote, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? None. So it passes unanimously. Let's see.
Okay, the next item I have,
Excuse me, Chair, if we just, so that's the item that the spreadsheet was prepared on, it's just supplemental information. Is that
Mhm.
the 22 we just talked about?
Yes.
plus it had Jefferson on there as well, so you actually had 23.
So we'll just- That's helpful to me, but just in the future. if we
Yeah, we'll
continue
keep on
continue
adding to that.
as we go.
That's right.
Uh-huh.
And I guess, can this show up on the score?
And what should on school?
The additional columns of, or any of the, you know, the DFPs.
I'm sorry.
So on the school report card, to know what money has been requested by the school district, so that,
So we have all the DFPs already on our website,
I know, but.
but you want it on the school report card?
Yeah, I'm just wondering.
Okay.
Or maybe you could just do a link to.
Yeah,
Right.
we could probably do a link to it.
And that's true, Kathy. I do want to just kind of point something out with those. With the DFPs, there's no funds that have been targeted.
Okay, so it
Right.
would be premature to
This
even
is
say that they're
Remember,
requesting.
Remember, this is their strategic
Right.
planning document, sort of like what, if they had all the money, what
What
they would
would
want
they
to
do?
do and in which order. It does not commit any funds with the approval of a DFP,
So-
or even the creation of a DFP.
So when that approval comes in, then it would be more appropriate.
Then it turns into a project.
Right.
Mhm.
And that's really what you have out there when you see what debt, exists. Those are facility projects that have been completed and are, they have debt service or whatever attached to them.
Or are they ongoing, or, I mean, is it,
Well, it depends, most of them will have, because they're major projects, will have a 20-year bond that they're paying off. So in any kind of debt total, just like with any kind of entity, you're gonna have various stages of repayment on that debt. Some may be new issuances, some may be in their final years.
Which is why, when we did this new spreadsheet, we put the annual debt service on it, so you could see the annual debt service, but we're still struggling a little bit how to display
that.
or project that for
Right.
every single district, every single project in different stages, I guess.
Mhm.
right,
And in some cases, they're gonna be funding things with cash, not debt. So-
right. Yeah, okay.
So, we could look to putting a link to the DFPs, but it really doesn't commit them to any funding. It doesn't really impact their financial at the
Yeah.
DFP stage.
Yeah, right. And I think it would be more appropriate for the school report card to do actual and not projected.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, that makes sense.
okay.
Okay, should we move on to item 3? or-
Okay, you're ready? All right. Item 3 is kind of a unique situation. If you recall, back in the fall, October and December, you all approved the local district tax rates for all the school districts that were coming in. In the case of Franklin County, the rates that were charged were 39.8 for the real estate and personal property, and it should have been 39.9 for personal and I got this backwards. The approved was for 39.8 for real estate and 39.9 for personal, but in reality, their office, when they transmitted their rates to the sheriff, and what the sheriff charged was 39.8 cents for both real estate and personal property. So what was approved was not what was charged, okay? So then you have this conundrum, what do you do with that? And they felt like it would not have been good PR to try to go back and collect that 0.01 cent from all the taxpayers. So what they did is they went back and they've amended their tax rates to marry up with what they actually charged. But in doing so, they also had to come back to you all and ask for you to approve the amended rates. So that's what this is. This is actually what they did charge versus what you all had originally approved.
So this is not the rate, it's the process. Again.
Right.
So we're not having an opinion on,
How much,
Yeah, how much the rate is.
we're just good.
so you're wanting, our task is to make sure that everyone is compliant with the process.
And the reason they've come back, obviously, they don't want to rebuild. It would probably actually cost them more to rebuild everybody.
Right.
And
to
from
just-
a PR perspective, so they actually build less than the rate that we had approved, so they're asking you to just lower the rate to match what they build.
Do you know what it cost them total?
Jay, do you have any idea what it would cost?
No, and there's a kind of a de minimis with the sheriffs because some property that they assess is so, a couple thousand, you're talking 0.1 cent per 100, so
Yeah.
the sheriff won't even bother collecting most of it because
Yeah.
it just doesn't.
And they
add
do
up.
pay typically an administrative fee,
Anywhere from 1.5% to 4%.
yeah, to the
To the
sheriff to
sheriff,
do that.
they may trim his wage a little bit if he messed it up.
Mhm.
So this is basically, and we get this from time to time, just a miscommunication between district and sheriff, or
Yeah.
somewhere in the chain, if you will.
So this does happen.
Yeah, rare, but it does happen from time to time, so.
Okay,
So it'd really help the district out if we could
Yes.
approve this.
I'll make a
Okay.
motion to approve.
all right, do we have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So, review items.
So, what we had intended on talking about in this part was about, again, continuing our discussion on the biennial budget request. But at that time, we had really hoped that we were gonna have the actual instructions for the defined calculations, so we could go through with you and say, here's how much we're being charged for rent, here's how much we're being charged for this, and you have a better understanding of that. As Charlie said in the earlier meeting, we didn't get those budget instructions until this morning. They're a little behind.
Does that come from budget director or
It-
finance?
It comes from the Office of the State Budget Director and LRC. So they actually jointly prepare those budget instructions. So by this time, we usually already have them, and we've started kind of looking at them, and we could share more information, but we don't have that. So if we want to pick back up and talk again about the ADRs on our spreadsheet, that might be another thing that we could do to continue our discussions from this morning. If, I mean, that's the pleasure of the committee. Like if you want more detail on any of the items on here,
Why are they so behind?
that's a good
So
question,
John Chilton.
but I don't know the answer to that.
It's hard to get people to agree on anything. They were probably like the board at Jefferson 6-1.
Chair, I have a question on
Yes.
this. The blue categories, the education finance application through a new initiative,
Yeah.
$500,000.
Yeah.
What finance system are we talking about?
So this is actually our in-house system that was developed that helps us calculate and distribute seed. So it is our primary, seed system. It was built many, many years ago. It has some things that don't work very well about it. For example, we get questions often, if you wanted to do a 1% increase to seek across the board, we have to do things very manually. And then it doesn't keep history of those queries. And so if we get it again, we have to do it manually again. So that's part of the challenge. It was also kind of a homegrown system. We have staff here on site that help us maintain it. If we have to do anything that's a little weird or different, again, it's more manual in nature. It's not, we have fewer really reporting requirements out of it that are more automatic. It also relies upon us reaching out to other data collection places to pull information into that, to then run the numbers, and ideally, for example, transportation. So we'd like to develop not really changing seed, but we need a more robust system to be able to handle it all. The reason that we only see $5,000 in that first year, that's a lot of money, but we would have to go through a competitive process, a competitive RFP solicitation. We would try to find an outside vendor that could help us come up with a more robust system to handle all the pieces and parts. And then we would like them to maintain that system for us. It would be more along the lines of, David talks about Munis being our financial accounting system and Infinite Campus being a system like that. We'd like to get the SEEK system so there's more like that as well.
It's about 12 years old now.
The technology.
It's changed a lot. And we've added a lot to it, so we went from just Seek, it calculates tax rates for us, and collects annual financial reports. It's got a mountain of reports built into it, but obviously we want more flexibility in reporting and things like that. A lot's changed in 12 years.
And all that is, I mean, we house that on internal servers, right? That's-
Mhm. It's a very important system
Yes.
that if something would go wrong, it would be really bad.
Yeah.
It would be really bad.
Do you mind explaining to me the E-rate eligible rebate thing that we went over this morning? I didn't quite get that.
Okay, so the federal government through the FCC and the school administrative claiming area, they have a program called E-rate. E-rate is to try to encourage school districts and actually libraries is a part of it as well, to be able to really keep robust systems as far as technology, and they have certain categories that if you buy certain things, then they will rebate you up to 90% back in federal funds. So we make the purchase first, and then we, on behalf of districts, because some things we pay for here on behalf of all districts, example of that would be like our network. We pay down to the district level. So we can actually get reimbursement for that. Not 100%, but a significant portion. And then if districts are purchasing things, they can also get reimbursement back. So it really leverages our state dollars with federal reimbursement coming back in.
And
So
that flows through you, or do they do that directly with the federal government?
well, we do it and they do it too. So we
In
do,
parallel?
yeah, so we have, if we're expending the dollars here, we're seeking that E-rate reimbursement. If they're expending the dollars down there, they're seeking the reimbursement.
Okay.
But the state dollars that initially go to them, then that's part of what they're using to then seek reimbursement. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So
They get
it's a
reimbursed for
wonderful.
the state dollars, we don't. We
So
send the
we
state dollars
wouldn't
to
get
them.
reimbursed twice, right?
Okay.
Yeah, but the reason that we are expending dollars up here is because it's for items that economies of scale have allowed us to enter into statewide contracts
All right.
to get,
Procurement?
to get procurement done and to also get a reduced price to start out with. So that would be like our network services.
Mhm.
So we're actually running that line down to them, so they're benefiting from it, but we're expending the dollars up here so we can apply for the rebate. Whereas if they're buying things down at the local level, then they're applying for those rebates.
So,
It's
and
a
that
wonderful program.
is, so that line item, because we are being reimbursed, is probably gonna be on the ABR, right?
That line item is.
Well, yeah, this, the CATS, KET.
You're just saying that it should definitely be one that's
Well,
included in top
oh,
three.
yeah, I mean, I think
I
that's
totally
why Commissioner Lewis
Mhm.
was looking at it so favorably, as well as just all the need that we have in order to do all the additional things as far as online testing and all the, I mean, it's a great need, but it also helps leverage those dollars
Right.
to get federal money coming in to
Yeah, I
support
mean,
it.
so we can approve that one without it actually affecting.
It's not all, it's not 100% reimbursed.
Was 90%?
It's, well, up to 90%. Again, it's depending on what
What it
you
is.
purchase.
So you don't know.
So it
for
could
sure.
be, some things
Like
are
he was
70%.
saying, some hardware would be
Yeah,
reimbursable and
yeah,
some
they'll have
wouldn't, so.
different reimbursement rates.
Okay.
Depending on the program.
Okay.
And then I think the other thing that we talked about earlier, school improvement funds, of course, the commissioners really talked about that a lot
Right.
as far as the need for those.
And obviously, we talked about wrapping the, I mean, to me, and looking at vocational education and whatnot, that obviously is one of our major
Right, and-
initiatives of the board
And I
anyway.
think an important note about all those line items,
Mhm.
of course, we heard a little bit this morning too about the career and tech ed task force that's going on, the report that's being done by OEA. So all of these line items and the dollars associated with them are calculated and based upon if we had the system we have now.
Right, and we don't know what that's gonna look
And,
like.
and if it would change, then of course, as the task force would come out with different options or different, and these numbers likely would change in order to support whatever new design comes out of that. But if nothing happens, we need this money to continue our operations as it is.
And I just think that has to be there. I mean, that's,
The one I have a question about, and again, this is something that's been on our radar screen every year, is the full funding for transportation, city transportation. I just feel the districts ought to have some participation in that cost. They've got to have a reason to operate an efficient system, and they really don't if you're giving them 100% reimbursement. And, you know, I saw in Jefferson County, for instance, when they couldn't hire enough bus drivers, they found a way to reconfigure their routes and eliminate 200 drivers.
Did they really?
Yeah, because they
Well,
had
see,
to.
this is a subject that just is very difficult for me to not understand, that people seeking cost efficiencies, and unless they are properly incentivized, is very difficult. I mean, we all know that we're all human. And if you don't have to, there are a lot of things you don't do. So I wish, I'm in agreement with you, Rich, that we could
I think
incentivize efficiencies if we didn't reimburse 100%.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I just know they're down to 4 drivers and they start picking up at 2 a.m.
I mean, but seriously, how much of that contributes to these children on the bus for 2 hours a day? I would imagine they contribute a lot to it. So I don't know, I'm kind of on the fence about that, but.
Do we know anything at all about how efficient transportation is in the schools? You know, because like, at least where I live, you drive by schools and it's just filled with automobiles with either parents or kids driving. And you always go, who's on the buses, right?
It's very seldom you see a bus that's more than halfway full.
Right.
Unless you come down my neck of the woods, and then you're in rural America where
Yeah.
some of them don't have automobiles, and
Yeah.
that's the only way they're getting.
Right, and the districts.
You know, and our buses are very full.
No, I'm just
Yeah.
wondering
Yeah.
if there's a way to calculate it.
And I think
Efficiency
it's
rating.
way different, and it's not gonna be very difficult in, you know, the school districts that I'm accustomed to seeing, obviously, because we're looking at a very small area versus a.
Chad,
Jefferson
do you want to talk a little bit about how the funding mechanism works as far as?
So the formula is fairly
What the
complicated,
inputs
but
are?
it is looking for that efficiency and calculated cost per pupil day. Every day what it takes to get them from point A to point B. There's something we look at called T-codes, and that's if a kid's on a bus more than a mile twice a day or once a day. It gets into some really detailed data, but Jefferson County, because they're so dense, a lot of kids in that area, that rewards them for that efficiency of, you know, what it costs them. And then what the calculation will do is if you're very efficient, it actually rewards you by giving you a little more money above what your cost is. Now, if you're in a district that's very rural and you've got to drive a lot of miles to pick up a few kids,
Yeah.
that's geography, you can't really control that, plus where
Right.
people live.
Right.
You can't squeeze them in.
Which is what you see in
Right.
Wake County.
Right.
Which is
So-
why you sometimes see with a bus
Yeah.
that doesn't have,
Yeah.
it's not completed.
And without getting into the line items of each calculation, it's basically, those districts do tend to take a bit of a bite because they just can't be efficient. Now, in a
Right.
perfect world, every kid lives close to school or close enough. But Pike County has their own issues of distance. What was it, 10 or 11,000 miles a day?
Well, they
put on
can't
their
even
buses.
get to.
Right.
So many of these places.
It's not a
you know,
straight line.
Right.
You know, that's what their superintendent's told us repeatedly. It's
Yeah.
never a straight
Yeah.
line.
It's not as the crow
Um,
flies.
But it looks at, the biggest bulk of the cost is that how much they spend to transport to and from school. And that's very specific. We don't pay for field trips and things like that. But the formula, which has not changed, I'm not even sure how long ago it's been, it hasn't changed since I've been here, really does look at that efficiency. And Independence are a completely different animal. A Dayton, which has a very small area, or a Bowling Green, which is a little bit larger, but there's a lot of kids there. So the formula does reward efficiency. Now, when we go and talk to districts at conferences, that's one thing we point out to is the more efficient you are, the better the odds that you'll actually get a little more money for being efficient. And back to Mr. Gilmore's point about the funding level, you know, obviously the more that's funded, the more districts get for transportation, and that the more efficient districts will end up getting more of that pie, if you will, even if it's limited, if they do get
So
more
it's
pie.
based on a median for that size school district.
Right, it groups districts into kind of like dense districts.
So it's not an
Jefferson-
actual cost reimbursement?
No, no.
It's
Okay,
calculated.
it's based on the
Yeah.
formula.
It's a very long calculation.
And then they are, I think the whole point is they are coming in at transportation costs.
Oh, yeah.
It's not like, you know, the funds coming from the state are covering.
Yeah, and I
transportation
think
costs.
I think
Or
that's
that
the
burden.
question. Does the state pay for all of it, or does the
Mhm.
state reimburse based upon this formula? They're still expending their own dollars, and we
Mhm.
reimburse based upon the formula back to them, or, you know, is it a portion or is it all?
Yeah.
Well, that makes more sense.
Mhm.
It's based on the formula, not their actual costs.
Right, because then Jefferson would eat it all up probably.
Right,
pretty
yeah,
quickly.
it'll be gone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Hire
gone.
bus drivers and pay them
Yeah.
$40 an hour probably.
Yeah.
Okay.
And really what drives a lot of the costs anymore is the one thing we pay close to diesel fuel.
Yeah.
When it goes up, every couple of years ago,
Pretty
it
low.
gets, you know, when that goes up, everyone's cost is going to go up. But most of the time that we've seen, most districts operate about the same transportation cost year to year. There will be years where you just have a lot of bus breakdowns. If you're in, you know, Bracken, for example, and you have 3 buses that just blow a transmission, and then that's why we have bus replacement, that's built into the formula as well, so that helps them get new buses and take old repair-prone ones off the road and things like that.
Shay,
Once they
so
have,
just to clarify, we have the ability in this budgeting process to say, yes, we're going to follow that formula to the T, or whatever that might be, or we can say, we are going to do partial, or we
60%.
budget partial for it, or is it a statute?
Yeah, is
required?
it statute driven, how this?
Yeah, it
works?
is
Okay,
statutory
okay.
driven.
So then technically we should, to be obviously following statute, be paying whatever
Yeah.
formula is dictated.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay.
Then they just decide what. how
What,
much
and
wanna
they
fund.
decide whether or not they're gonna give it to us,
Yeah,
and then it goes from
part
there.
of it or.
Okay, got it.
So we just take whatever is appropriated.
Sure.
And follow the formula and give the, yeah.
So
Whatever-
again,
whatever according
us
to
talking
the
about this probably is all for naught, because,
You're not gonna get it anyway.
well, whatever we get is what we get, and that's what we're gonna distribute. So why waste our time coming up with some magical filler for that line item? I don't know.
That's the
To
case
me,
with
it's
almost
a,
everything.
you know,
I'm
right,
sorry I
exactly.
cost you all so much money.
I'm telling, listen.
All my programs are costing.
Of all my years of finance, I've never seen a budget so complicated. I'm like, wow, it was like, you know,
I know.
Chair,
brain surgery.
I'd go through it, I have a few questions.
Go ahead, go.
Go through, just kind of going down the list. The school improvement funds, it talks about increased staff by approximately 50 to
Mhm.
13 million. So a couple of questions around that. Increase it by 50, and we have about how many today?
70?
70, so this would take us
Yeah.
from 70 to 120. I think that would be helpful in the description, or whatever ends up sending to whoever looks at these things. Because at 13 million, if you think 13 million for 50, it just doesn't, it seems like it's pretty high pay there. 120 makes more sense. Also learned that if somebody picks an outside entity, we pay for it. I didn't know we did that.
That's busted.
Generous. The 14.4 million there, that assumes the 8.3 went to 0.
I think that assumes 8.3 would go around 4.
So
Because there's still some not residual, there's still some
Federal funds.
ongoing Title I money
Uh-huh.
that Kelly plans to use for this purpose.
So are we saying, so in the write-up it says 13 million, this says 14.4, but really we're gonna spend 18
I think
ideally?
That's what I believe, in that neighborhood,
So what would the extra 5 be for?
for some of the existing current staff. Because
Okay, I thought the 13 million would cover all staff.
13,
14, you mean?
No, it says here, increased by approximately 50 for 13 million. Is
Oh,
that
I
how
see.
many million
Yeah.
in the write-up description?
Mhm.
Saying 13 million, but it's 14.4 in the column.
Yeah, and not so much that, but if it's really 18, I'm just wondering what kind of
Could be
federal,
other costs,
what is the
too.
number? You know, is kind of what I was, the 13 and 14, I'm not so worried about
I
that.
understand.
Um,
I believe the total amount for that program, if we funded all the people that Kelly's requesting, is around 18.
And that would be for 120 people. we
Oh.
think.
Yes. And all that money doesn't go directly to those people. She funds 3 hub schools there, I think,
Carter.
on Bowling Green, Carter, and,
Franklin Simpson.
oh, Franklin
I think
Simpson.
that's what it used to be.
Yeah. So, and some of that money goes to them they really focus on, that used to be called low something, now it's TSI.
I would love to see, after this meeting, just kind of a breakout on the
Yeah,
18 or kind
sure.
of where it goes.
No problem.
Just- It's a big number. and
We've got
Somebody's
that.
gonna ask about it
Yeah.
at some point. How
Probably
much
diagnostic
personnel, how much goes direct to
Mhm.
the district? And these are people that are hired, the 120 are hired by KBE,
Mhm.
but every day they would work in that
Yes,
district.
they work in that district. Kelly goes through a really comprehensive, trying to match where people can go based upon
Where they live.
geography, where they live. I think for the most part, that works pretty well, but she does have some outliers. Many
They're
of,
living there
But once the
during
school's
the
no
week,
longer
basically.
CSI, they come out of that school and go to a different school.
yeah, they can either go to a different school, or they sometimes go back into a school district as a support person, an
Yeah,
employee there.
Right, get a job
Yeah,
from the
yeah,
district.
they would go back and do that, so.
And these aren't KDE staff.
So they're new hires?
We contract with co-ops or school
School
districts
districts.
to use their existing
Mhm.
staff, the ones that apply, and we choose they're the best qualified for this. They have, they're in 3 groups: reading literacy specialists, math specialists, and leadership specialists usually have a principal or central office person on a team. Depending on the district's need, they fall into these categories for different reasons.
So Charlie, are they our employees?
No, so they're still employees of the school district, whatever district that could be.
We're paying the district for their
And
time.
we
Yes.
reimburse the district for their services. And we sort of have a rule that we like to keep them for 3 years or less. A few cases, we've kept these people longer than that. But, districts don't want to give up good staff forever.
So who do they report to, the district or us?
So us,
They report to Kelly Foster, to Kelly's office.
Yeah.
she's got 3
And she's got
education
re-
recovery
Yeah,
directors.
she's got 3 regional people that
Right.
they then report up through.
But she has supervisory authority over them, or her office does?
I think the way I
Or
understand it, because I asked the question, was
employer.
they're like a 1099
Yeah,
contract.
they're like a
Well, not
contract
exactly,
employee.
because,
They're like a contract employee.
well, but you're paying the school district to pay them.
Yes, they are,
But we're
yeah,
still
they are not
effectively
our
in control.
employee.
When 1099 employees come to work for me, they're still working for me doing what I
Yeah,
tell
see,
them to
no,
do,
this
but I'm
isn't
paying a third
1099.
company.
Because they're not getting our money.
No, I understand that, but it's
It's
like
an
if I paid a
MOA.
third, if I paid a third company, a third party who's
Like,
paying
Almost like
the
if you,
employees.
and
Or
I
the
don't,
least
I don't
employee.
wanna,
Yeah.
it's almost
Temp
like
agency.
a temp
Right.
agency,
Yeah.
almost.
I just
mean,
want to
don't
make sure
wanna
we
make
don't
that.
have confusion there with them telling them one thing on hours, working conditions, this kind of thing, and we're telling them something else.
And statutorily, the department has the ability statutorily to hire people in this manner. So we can hire, yes, under memorandum of agreement with local school districts, we have the statutory authority to do that, to basically help us with the work here to help districts.
But typically, we don't.
Well, we do in Kelly's area. We also have some content specialists that we actually come from local school districts to help us with math or science. Some of the people that are working on the standards work actually are on MOA with us from local school districts. Yeah.
But maybe a dozen or 15, the rest of the department.
Yeah. We used to have more than that until, of course, our budget got cut.
Oh, yeah.
And we sent about 25 of those folks back to their local school districts, not because we wanted to, but we didn't have the money to pay for them.
But I think at the end of the day, we don't have enough people to do the work that we have coming with all of this anyway,
We
so.
don't have enough money to do that.
Right. So either way we look at it, it's,
Right.
we gotta try to do it, but it's gonna be tough to do.
So in the technology system, part of that talked about getting matched by the federal government at 2, 3, 4 to 1,
Yes.
whatever.
Mhm.
That'd be interesting, at least in the description of how much of that additional 14.6 would be approximately
Yeah, I
would
can
be
write that down
eligible
from
for
this
the
morning.
match.
Mhm.
I think the legislator would like to know that, I'd like to know.
Mhm.
The new teacher induction one, I had a question, Kathy, you raised that in the meeting, I think.
Yes.
The, important, but sometimes pass-throughs I've seen in other government areas, it just kind of goes into a bucket, and the district says, oh yeah, we did orientation, and it helps cover some costs without really providing meaningful mentoring or induction for that new teacher. It's like, oh yeah, we already do new teacher, thanks for the check, it's great. You know, well, of course we spent it on that. Is this something that we do, or it's just support to the district, or they can kind of do whatever orientation they want? I know it's a high priority in here, but I'm wondering about the accountability that it really goes for training that we think is effective for those new teachers.
So, and the main maybe can help me a little bit as far as, I think the commissioner is thinking about this because there used to be a program called KTIP.
And we cut it.
Well,
didn't
the General Assembly cut it.
we? Who did?
The General
General
Assembly.
Assembly.
Yes, yeah, that,
We didn't.
we
cut it.
as the state.
Yes, the General Assembly cut it. So I think he is not thinking about redoing KTIP. It would be different than that. And the $600 that we have basically costed out per new teacher really would not, you know, I think districts are spending more than that right now on new teacher inductions, the ones that are doing it. So I think this would just really kind of supplement what they're doing. I don't know that he envisions that we would dictate exactly what that would look like.
So I think what he had talked about is that he doesn't want to force everybody into like a KTIP model, because the power of KTIP was the mentoring and the extra adult assistance, but the portfolio requirements and all that really didn't yield that it made somebody better. It was more things to do as a first-year teacher, and so he doesn't want to narrow that scope. What he wants to do, because other districts, many districts have lots of different induction programs, whether they do ongoing throughout the year book studies, or they bring new folks in, or whatever they may do. There's several models, and so I think when we were going through districts who have established induction programs that are not just a one day, but are a little more comprehensive, about $1,500 per new teacher is what they typically spend at least. And so he was wanting funding to help them develop induction programs that have some flexibility in how they do it, so they're not forced to have every single person do the exact same thing. So that was the discussion.
Who receives the money for that? What's the
It would be
extra cost?
the district, so it could be to pay a stipend to mentors, it could be to pay sub for the mentoring teachers to go in
Being
and
out of
observe.
classrooms, yeah.
It could be, yeah, so there's some flexibility on the use of that. I don't know the detail of exactly what he'd want from districts on that piece, but it was just to not force everybody to have to use the exact same model. That's what it was.
Just
But
thinking back to yesterday, you know, we
Mhm.
saw that, you know, teacher collaborative, peer-to-peer, teacher teams was
Absolutely.
not just once a year, but
Oh, it's ongoing.
is
That's right.
key. And if that's really the culture we're trying to get to, I'm wondering, this idea of a new teacher induction is sort of a one-time mentoring program, when really we want to get to
Right.
peer-to-peer collaboration on a weekly
Sure.
basis.
It's
You know,
really
it
to,
matters.
absolutely, it's really to really push on the additional support for the first couple of years, really, to get teachers into it. So the collaboration, and also having a mentor, somebody to go to and go, I've never done this part before. How do I do that? And that really was the beauty of KTIP. It was just a very expensive program with a lot of other pieces and ratings and all those things. But the power of it was the mentor and having that extra support. So you have three people seeing what you're doing and coaching you instead of just one. So this is just to give more flexibility. But I'm sure we could talk more.
It almost
in
seems like it
detail
should be a cultural change, right? Where it's
Absolutely.
like, this is just part of.
Of what we do.
What we do.
Of
That's
experienced
right.
teachers working with new teachers and.
That's right, and several of our districts already have that because they don't want to lose their teachers. So, and then using that, rank 2 isn't required anymore, it's optional. What they're doing is trying to incentivize support and then to change the rank.
Although new teacher induction is important, unless we had something really specific that we wanted to achieve, sort of my recommendation, that would be below the grade line item. You know, anyway, it sounds like several of the districts have figured out, you know, a way to do it anyway. And,
Or the money could, I mean, I don't know, who called it new teacher induction? Is that, we as a
yeah,
department?
Yeah, that's just something.
The
Because-
proposed language.
Yeah.
To Chairman Heiner's point, do we want to consider maybe keeping it where it is, but repurposing it for a broader cultural shift to incentivize that kind of collaboration?
Teacher teams or something,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know how you.
With an emphasis
Yeah.
on new teachers, but,
And I think, I mean, in talking to Wayne, or at least what I've gotten from Wayne is that, you know, ultimately, we want to encourage those aspects that we are seeing are working for these.
close the gaps.
Correct, but every district is different. So who are we to go into District A and say, you need to look just like Owen County? Because it's rocking, it's working, because it won't work for them.
That.
No, I know, I think that's the concern, right, though, that if we give this money and say, hey, do this, because we're not telling them how to do it, so they're doing it consistently, then is it a waste of money?
Well, there
Because
still
it's
has to
not.
be some accountability. though.
Sure,
And I was gonna ask,
So-
how do you get?
but I think to be
accountability?
reimbursed, you show what it is that you're doing
Yeah,
that's
so-
meeting that growth.
so
But
because
again,
this
that's
is-
defining success as
Mhm.
spending the money. I
Mhm.
mean, shouldn't there be an outcome we expect?
Very good.
And they have their turnover data, they know their percentage of brand new teachers, they have that, we already published that and have been in the school report card.
I just have a lot of
That's
faith in
something they
Wayne's
can set
ideas, and
goals.
it's important to him, so it's important to me.
Well, because one of the key things even about yesterday is you will never get grade level instruction or grade level resources or belief system if you don't have that teacher in the room doing that. I mean, that's what we heard yesterday a lot, is that they were like, this is the quality and the commitment in the classroom. So I think the whole push on the induction is, once we get them in, how are we gonna support them to keep them and build their capacity, rather than have empty classrooms or another new teacher and then another new one. Because there's, you know, research on that, when a child has 2 years in a row of a brand new teacher,
Mhm.
they start to lose ground, you know, so which is why it's important to have a balanced staff.
So what's the concern with the label, new teacher? Why don't we just call it
Well,
teacher
that,
induction? Or teacher
to Hal's
advancement?
point, that it's sounding like it's almost like a one-off, that there's a new teacher, they're gonna
Right,
get a
like-
mentor.
And then next year you get the same stipend for doing the same thing. Maybe
Right.
it looks more at retention efforts through a mentoring type process and focus on teacher retention versus
Or teacher
new
mentoring.
teacher induction,
You could
teacher
call it
mentoring.
Teacher mentoring.
Because that's
Focus on-
ongoing, that's not something that's just a first year teacher.
And I would think.
I'm still
that-
mentored, I'm sure everyone is, but.
Yep.
Just, yeah, trying to imagine being in the General Assembly.
So
and
trying
where
to
they-
get it to
where they
go.
knock, you know, K-tip out, and
Mhm.
then we say, well, really, it's a top priority to put it back in.
Yeah.
Maybe it is, I don't know, but it wasn't in, I think, the top 5 we talked about this morning.
Do we know what K-tip cost? Was there any
She said,
analysis
"Well, it's a
ever
line
done?
item."
I think a little bit more than that.
A little more than 2.5 million a
Million
year.
annually.
But can you compare it to the $600? Like, what would it be
Yeah,
if
so,
it were
so it was
here?
in 3 pieces. One went to the teacher, the new teacher. One went to a university supporter, like an advisor from the university level, what they call that person?
Yeah.
And then one went to the mentor teacher at the school.
I guess stipend for actually
Yeah.
doing the.
Paid for
Being a mentor.
subs, and the mentor teacher received college credit.
Yeah.
So they receive a stipend and then they receive college credit at a public university. And so that was the incentive for the mentor to do their 50 hours of mentoring, 25 in the classroom, 25 outside of the classroom, and helping the intern with their portfolio, their 3 observations, all the requirements.
So, but we don't have a number that we could compare to the one that we put here.
I'm sure we could pull what the line
Or
items. I
can
That
don't
was,
you-
know
you know,
what
that
it is.
program was before they were with KBE, and I'm just going from
Yeah.
Memory.
memory.
Yeah, we'd have to-
Seems pretty good,
I thought it was like
I'm rolling with it.
1,400 a
Yeah,
teacher.
Yeah, it was quite a bit.
Yeah,
$1,400 or $1,500
Yeah, 14 or 15.
for the 3 pieces for each person.
Yeah,
involved.
per teacher.
And I was gonna say, Hal, you talked to
Teaching
Wayne
unit.
more, are you saying that,
Teaching unit.
maybe I misunderstood, you felt like Wayne, if you asked Wayne to narrow down his top 5, this is not one of them?
This was maybe, really, we grouped enough together that it was the only one above the bar that wasn't in the top 5.
Okay, got it.
Um,
And so his focus would be more on that certified
And
teachers.
my concern here is getting too much down into the local, to
Yeah.
the local district
Mhm.
where here's, just some additional money to do something, when really it comes right to the core of what they do, right? I mean, the core
We can't
is,
shift their culture. They need to shift their
is
culture.
teacher collaboration, growing great teachers, building a, great system for kids. And if we start, you know, here's a check for this, and a check for this, and a check for this.
Because
And
they-
people are checking boxes. and
Your
that
ears
kind of stuff.
burning?
I mean, I'd rather just, you know, if we're gonna do $1.5 million, I'd just rather, you know, put it in seat, you know, and, you know, leave
I
them
think,
the
I think it's
discretion, encourage
achievement,
them to
right?
do,
Achievement.
you know, all of
is
these cultural things.
what we incentivize, because to me, the cultural shift will lead to achievement, and achievement
And so
is
we want
Goes
what
to the
we're
core of
focusing
it.
on now from the blue down.
Yeah, the core of what they should be
Right,
doing
that's the
anyway.
big-
Exactly,
So-
yeah. No, I totally get that, that's, like I
Well, I get
said,
it, except that it's not
I'm a
happening.
new teacher
Mhm.
induction.
So you want me to, maybe give you just a quick overview of what we were thinking on it? So you have the background for K-TEP, right? You know what K-TEP was. What's happened in the absence of K-TEP funding, over the last couple of years is you have some districts that have moved forward with some pretty innovative induction models that actually build on what K-TEP was doing, but to be frank, is better. And so I lean against asking the General Assembly to reinstate K-TEP as written, and to fund it as written in law, because it would then require that districts move away from some of the models they developed that I think are more innovative than K-TEP. So what we put together was a proposal for grants, kind of non-competitive grants that would go to school districts to support new teacher induction programs. And there would be some parameters around it, not really tight parameters, but because we want to allow for some innovation and difference in terms of what they're doing. But to give you an idea of what most of these funds go for teachers, they go to pay for substitute teachers. Sometimes while new teachers are doing training, they go to provide stipend support for mentor teachers. That's a major cost for teachers. And they go for materials to support what they're doing. So I think we could, in a non-competitive grant, you could give some relatively loose parameters around what it has to be used for, require that it go towards supporting new teacher induction programs while still allowing for some innovation, and at a much cheaper cost than fully funding what K-TEP was.
as part of that non-competitive grant, would there be any, quote-unquote, follow-up reporting or anything that, where we could see basically
It could be.
what, maybe what
Absolutely.
what those dollars have done?
I think that's reasonable. I think that's absolutely reasonable. I mean, you could ask for, I mean, the most direct outcome I think you would want to see
Mhm.
from new teacher induction is maybe some numbers on retention.
Right,
Right, so what kind of impact are these efforts having on retaining?
because ultimately that's our goal here.
Well, and ultimately, that would allow us to share those best practices, the ones that
Across
are
the-
doing well,
across the
to
Commonwealth.
share across the
Yeah.
Commonwealth.
Because while some districts, and I pick on Henderson all the time, that has developed a really a pretty nice induction program. There are lots of other districts, not necessarily because they don't want to, but because they don't have the available funds to provide stipends or substitute teachers. They're doing nothing. And we do know from the research literature, if you don't do anything in terms of induction and support for new teachers, you're gonna lose it.
Mhm.
This would be a discretionary grant? Discretionary grant. In other words, you review the application and you like what they're gonna do or don't like what they do, and they may get funding and they may not.
I would want it more in terms of, if we're gonna put parameters in place, I think my preference would be if they meet the parameters that are in place in terms of what they're applying, then they get the grant.
And then
This would be handled like a grant, then there would be follow-up accountability and that kind of.
we could build it however we want to.
We could propose it that way.
Yeah.
The only thing I would ask though is that if we propose it that way, that we don't make it too tight. Because
Right.
if we make the parameters
Not
too
like
tight.
K-TEP. K-TEP was too tight. It's interesting, after we withdrew funding, they began to innovate,
Right, right.
but only after we withdrew funding.
Well, it's a combination of withdrawing funding, and if you withdraw funding, you no longer have the
Yeah,
requirements
the
of K-TEP.
statutory
Right.
requirements.
So you
So
can
the
be more
statutory
creative.
requirements didn't
So they
tighten
wouldn't have
it
to.
anymore.
And we're not a one size fits all, I mean, it's a beauty of,
And why would we pay for mentoring? I don't understand that. I mean, that's pretty much common in the world, that experienced people help new people, and get energy from
We
people's ideas.
pay mentors
I
and our,
mean,
and our sales staff, that nobody wants to help the underdog. I guess it's a different,
I was gonna say, I
Industry.
mean, unless it's a part of
We
their
just don't
job, though,
Yeah.
you won't get enough people
Yeah.
willing
To do it.
to take on the responsibility.
the time.
But it's in their own interest though for retention. Why wouldn't they?
I think so if you think about a school, it's in the school's interest,
Mhm.
but the commitment that the mentor is making is an
Individual.
individual commitment.
Right.
but it's outside of normal school hours.
It can
Can
be,
be.
it can be, and it's absolutely in addition to your regular responsibilities.
The quality of the mentoring is better when you pay it. We've done it all ways over 25 years. so
The
I
other
think
thing
it's-
that improves the quality of mentoring is training. So
Right.
part of it too is you have to train
Train the
mentors.
mentors and how to do it, the processes, you know.
But it can include, counseling, kind of career counseling time with them, spending time in that new teacher's classroom, providing them feedback on lessons, modeling lessons for them, giving them specific feedback on how they can improve.
Grade appropriate curriculum.
I think a stipend is appropriate.
So we heard yesterday several speakers talk about the importance of teacher teams, peer-to-peer, learning, talking.
Yep.
Could this funding be used in some way to help the establishment of those?
I think
those
this is
teams?
over and above that. I mean, teacher teams and the collaboration we talked about yesterday is important for all teachers. New teachers need an added level of support. So I don't think this is in place of, I think this is over and above what teachers would participate in with professional learning communities.
So in your top 5, I was thinking this was number 6. Because you ran out of numbers before you got to it.
I wasn't successful with the top 5, so
Okay, so you still think it's an important,
I think it's really important.
really important?
I think it's really important. The research is really, really clear on the importance of induction. And while we do have those innovative models of districts that are doing some things, there are way too many districts, because of lack of funding, they're doing nothing.
All right.
So what do they do with the new teacher then?
They say, have
Yeah,
at it.
they
Go get
from
them,
the
Tiger.
wolves.
Go
Do with it.
Good luck.
Yes.
I cannot
And
imagine.
they're probably on Pinterest.
I mean, wow.
A billion oysters.
Billion oysters. I need to go read that.
Wow.
So they're not bringing the new teacher in 2 weeks ahead of time with training?
2 weeks, I don't know of districts that would bring in anybody 2 weeks ahead of time. I think it's more typical to have, in terms of required teacher work days, just a couple days ahead of the time. Now, there are lots of teachers that go in a lot earlier than that on their own, because they're getting classrooms ready and they're planning. But in terms of required time, it's much more typical just to have a couple teacher work days right before the start of school.
All right.
That, I'm just wondering how much that plays into A, lack of retention, and B,
It
lack
plays
of
into it
interest.
huge, Kathy.
Because, you know,
Huge.
at least in the private sector, companies have reputations for how they integrate people in. And they just line up at the door to get jobs like, where my nieces all now work. Different consulting companies and Workday, and people just want to go there, but they're set up for it. And it's just, and I, as having a really little company, I just had to rely on the other people that work there, and they just, it just ate into production time, but that's how we trained new people, is you gotta go hang out with that dude.
Show
And
them how
that
to do
dude
it.
is gonna show you how to operate that machine.
And my succession plan.
Right. So it feels like that we're in a negative feedback loop.
No, your question about how it factors into the shortage issue is spot on, because the shortage is a combination of declines in enrollment and completion of teacher preparation programs and increased attrition.
I have to ask you that question. We ran out of time, but why are there so many people going into the program and so few completing? It was like 25% or 30 or 40%.
I had the national difference.
And, yeah,
I thought it was a really good question too. I don't have a clear cut answer.
well, we should ask the question.
Now, did
I
they go
think-
into another field, or did they just
We
quit
need to
altogether?
ask the question, because I think that the heads of schools of education are gonna be able to tell us something. Or we should start asking them to conduct exit interviews.
Well, we can ask in Kentucky, and we can come up with an answer for Kentucky. A
Okay, that
general
would be
answer in Kentucky. But if you notice, the discrepancy in Kentucky isn't
Isn't
nearly
near
as
as
large
no.
as the discrepancy you see in the national numbers. So
But
since-
They're still having, I know that, I've talked to Gary about it, even at Western, and, you know, a lot of their problem is, he was like, we've never actively recruited anybody. in our
Nobody does.
So-
That's not something typically colleges of teacher
Ever,
education do.
yeah.
Okay.
And they're trying at Western, so I think it's, like
But
I
I
said, they
still
can teach
think,
us.
knowing even nationally, why people are abandoning the course of study and the career and the interest in the degree could lend insight into what it is we might need to change here, at least at the 4-year level after high school. You know, I don't know what they're thinking, I don't know what they're saying about the degree, and it could be what we're teaching, what the course content is. I would love to know the answer to that question.
I can tell you, we lose a percentage of folks in colleges of teacher education at, so you come in, you declare yourself as an education major, but then you have to gain admittance to teacher preparation, teacher education, which is usually test scores and GPA, and we do lose some candidates because they can't get over the test score. The test score barrier to
Or there's a waiting
teacher
list.
education.
I mean, when I transferred, I was an education major, and when I went to U of A, I wasn't bilingual, so I was very much at the bottom of that list. And that's when I went into business. I'm
So
like, all right, well,
is
translate.
one of our goals here to provide feedback on ranking in 1 through 6 for these items, because we can't just lump them into high priority, we're supposed to come up with a number. So from a board standpoint,
Or even, I would even take priority 1, 2, and
Okay.
3.
so one thing I would recommend is striking the word vocational, and use technical or career and technical. That's kind of that's an old term.
That's just the,
Well, that's what it's technically called, that's why.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Oh, it's like in the accounting system or something?
In
But
statute.
it's in the statute.
Is it really?
That's,
It's
remember
too bad.
that's our old,
It's like-
It
we
is
call
too
it,
bad.
but,
At least it doesn't say shop class.
okay.
You can call it, what, layback? What do you call it?
It's hellish. VOTEC, that's what we call it.
That's right.
VOTEC when I was in high school. Right, Matt?
So can I make-
VOTEC.
Can I take a guess at 1 through 6, just a guess,
Go
just
for
to
it.
start? School for the blind, school for the deaf, number 1. As Commissioner said, they just don't have enough to operate. School improvement funds, number 2. CTE, I won't use that word, vocational, but anyway, CTE, the grouping there, number 3. KETS, number 4. National Board Certified, number 5, and teacher induction, number 6. I don't know if we get some feedback.
What'd you say, 5 was teacher certification?
Certifications.
yeah, National Board Certified.
Yeah. I
Oh,
don't know.
not industry,
Couldn't do
okay.
any better. I think coming to those top priorities, it's nearly impossible.
We need them all.
We just, yeah, we just did it.
Yeah.
Might as well throw a dart at Mac.
I mean, there's so many needs.
And what do you think the odds are we get any of it?
I don't know. At this point, I think it really is, I mean, it would just be a guess.
Yeah.
Historically, it's been negative, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the ABRs are discarded and then the
And we get a cut.
budget is reduced.
Mm-hmm.
But are revenues up for the state with the economy? I mean,
So remember, what's not here as well, for context, is school safety funding.
oh, true.
And the rationale for it not being there is the General Assembly's already made a commitment that they are going to fund Senate bill.
Safely, okay.
And also, local districts are really motivated to take care of that somehow, some way. I mean, there's a lot of support for that.
For ones that can,
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. I'm just saying, as opposed to some of these other things.
that's right,
Mhm,
That's right.
That's true.
Chair Heiner, you'll look at this, this is what we had for the presentation. It takes all the CTE programs that are on that list and puts them on one slide, and it kind of breaks it down, so it's, and you can use the top category, career and technical education, student transition, as the title that we refer to in conversations,
Lump them all.
and not vocational schools.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is that something like that?
It's all right.
Okay.
And that's a big
And that
number.
gets us like 6 more.
How dire is the funding need at the KSD and KSB?
The appropriation isn't enough to operate the schools.
You mean they will shut down without this? I mean, is that?
They're not safe.
Well-
It's part of it.
Well, one, they would shut down if we didn't take funding from other
someplace
places.
else.
Right.
Really?
And that's been for how long?
Since 12, I think.
Well, I mean,
To some
the
degree.
pictures speak 1,000 words, and we're looking at those pictures of, I'm just,
Anybody seen the new building in Danville?
it's beautiful.
Is it?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. We went to the Grand Opening.
It was
It was really cool, yeah. And that community is amazing, like the school community, I mean, it's just
Oh,
those
yeah.
teachers are, I cried and I couldn't even keep up with their sign language.
Did they fix lunch? They did.
Oh,
for the
no,
railroad.
they, well,
They did
they made, yeah, they had all these
Yeah.
Killer
cupcakes, but
They were
they're,
really
they're,
good.
they're kids in there, they're culinary
The culinary
kids.
arts kids, the
Mhm.
deaf chefs.
They had their new dorms back there, and so, anyway, it was just, and it's.
My only question
they were
is
so
whether
cute.
maybe we should reverse 1 and 2. I mean, school improvement funds, I think, is absolutely critical. That's been our biggest initiative, I think, over the last couple of years. And to not be able to follow through, I think it's going to be huge, huge loss for us. They're both important. I think school improvement funds is going to affect a lot more people and have a greater impact on outcomes, I
So,
think. But it's close.
And it's one of our strengths, like, I really good at it.
so one of the questions you asked was on, this may be one of the differences. Because both of those, I mean, I think belong at the very top. You asked if it weren't funded, the KSD additional funding weren't funded, kind of what we do with the school shutdown. We'd have to find the additional money from somewhere else. If we didn't have federal funds to do the school improvement work, I mean, I don't think we could find that additional money somewhere else. That would just mean
Yeah.
we'd be doing next to nothing.
Right.
It would be a drastically different model.
It's already a drastically
I
different
know, but it would be
model,
even off
with
of
the
that.
federal
Right.
funding. So we've gone from a model with our priority schools, and tell me if you guys have had this conversation already. But we've gone from a model, the model that we've been recognized for, the school improvement model, was having a 3-person team, 2 education recovery specialists and an education recovery leader that supported turnaround work in the schools. We've gone now to a model that is a 2-person model, and those two people have responsibility for multiple schools. We've gone to 3 people dedicated to school improvement in a low-performing school to 2 people who have responsibilities across schools. So even now, it's a drastically different model.
Yeah. What will that 14 million incrementally yield in federal funds, school improvement?
So Karen, in her infinite work ethic, has given me the exact information that Chair Heiner was asking for a moment ago. Thank you.
All right.
So the 14.4 would really fund the entire program with no federal funds needed. Okay? The federal funds that would be available to that would go to school districts instead through the Title I formula.
Which is where they should
They
be
should
going.
go on
Okay.
anyway.
Well, we just intercepted them.
Yeah.
I mean, the funds come to the state level, so they're still going
And
to
they're
the
eligible
district.
to be used for that.
So that's the total.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Thank you.
And that would fund 109 total staff, 109 total memorandum of agreement staff. It would allow us to do diagnostic reviews, which is the first step. We have to do 60, and they're average about 15,000 apiece. And then that would allow for using an audit for up to $500,000.
for districts that
Districts,
choose
right.
not to
That
go
choose
to
not
KBE.
to use KDE.
Which only one has chosen that now, I think, right?
One district, I think, 4 schools.
4 schools.
Within that district.
Okay.
What
What district?
happens to the schools, for the blind and the deaf if no money is given to them? Well, I just wanna know the critical nature of
We continue to do what we've been doing
And
since
just-
2012 and taking funds from other places to subsidize operations, which frankly is very similar to what we've been doing with area technology centers as well. The appropriation for their operation
Isn't
isn't, no,
sufficient.
it's not
So,
sufficient.
for CASB and KSD, one of the pieces that we struggle with is because, they are teachers, right? So they get rank and step increases, but we get no money budgeted for that. So it kind of compounds upon itself, which is the number that we are short keeps
Mhm.
getting bigger each year. So it started out that we were supplementing,
Maybe 100,000.
you know, 100,000,
Right.
200,000, now it's up to 1.5 million. So it's compounding each year
Right.
with us not receiving those funds to kind of shore it up. So that's a big piece of it, utility costs are a big piece of it. I mean,
You guys are on such a rush here.
So it has to be paid.
I mean,
Yeah,
You to-
it needs
to-
to
If
happen.
we're gonna stay open, we have to pay, we have to pay those things.
To Rich's point of making school improvement funds our top priority might help to focus on that particular topic if it's number one. And moving KSD to 2 might help with the optics.
And I'm fine with the other numbering it, like Wayne said, I mean, let's face it, you can put any of them up here, we need to do it all, so.
So I don't know what you, after that discussion, Rich, what you think?
I would agree. I would think the legislature would be more receptive.
It's a greater impact, I guess, overall.
They're hugely invested in that too.
Probably 400 schools, right?
Hmm.
400 schools we help, that Kelly helps.
Oh, no.
No,
So you're thinking about the TSI?
TSI too.
So TSI is going to be significantly reduced, but also education recovery staff, their primary work is with CSI.
Yes.
So the TSI schools have access to resources, the hub schools that are created around the states, that's important for them, but the staff, the actual education recovery staff, they're in the CSI schools, so that is
About
51.
51,
That's
51
51
full.
schools.
Well, and as we advocate, you know, we can talk in the context of, you know, we've had to put them in a priority order simply because that's what the budget instructions mandate us to do, right? But they're all important, and then focus on the 1 through 6 or whatever we come up with, so.
Hey, Rich, who's your favorite child?
Depends on which one I'm talking to.
So the board is really, I think the commissioner sets the priorities.
No,
You
we
hear
do-
the
we do it
recommendation,
together.
Do it together.
Yeah, we do it together.
Because the board's role is to approve our budget as we're getting ready to submit it. So however we put it together,
So basically, it
Make
would
sure
be
that you are
the finance
approving it.
committee's
Yeah.
recommendation back to the full board then, that this
That's
is.
certainly the way I'd like to do it together.
Yeah.
I
No.
thought there was a
Yes.
provision that
Yeah.
the board could do their own budget or something, which I'm not excited about.
But this is a review item for purposes of today. isn't
Yeah,
it?
today it's not for
and the
till
only,
October.
the reason we're trying to get down to this level is so that we can start cranking out,
Correct.
putting stuff in the system.
Mhm.
We're not gonna do anything different
Yeah,
than what
right.
the board.
Right.
So we would come back in October with the list,
Mhm.
so that you can see it.
So basically, we are going to, as a committee, you will review this with the full board as to what our intentions are at this point, and then.
And what are our intentions? The ranking that we wrote
Yeah.
with, but did we put school improvement funds as
Mhm.
1?
Mm-hmm.
And then 2 is the,
School for blind and deaf.
right, and 3 is local area vocational education
Well,
centers?
it's the whole,
Well,
it's
it's
that.
the whole
packet of
set.
5 items.
Okay.
clear and technical
That whole
stuff.
group?
It goes all the way down to C secondary to C
I need to be
vocational.
able to
Yes, ma'am.
Or can you just print that out?
Yep.
Okay, whole group here, and 4 is KETS, right?
Right.
And 5 is the National Board Certified Salary Supplement, okay.
And then you said 6
6
as.
is
Oh,
new
teacher
teacher induction.
We're gonna go to 6,
Okay.
okay, because
And
we
then,
can't keep it to 5.
and then if the board keeps it, I mean, we're gonna have to rank all these, but essentially what I'm hearing is if the board approves in October that you decide this is the list, then we just kind of put the rest in order as we
Yeah.
Okay,
can prioritize. But we absolutely wanted to get the top priorities of the board submitted.
okay, sounds good. Okay.
Thank you very much. I know that's really hard to do that because they are all so important.
Well, this is harder on you guys.
Yeah, you guys.
We all had really good discussion though.
Holy moly. Okay, thank
Robin,
you.
do
That
you
literally, it's
know,
amazing that you guys aren't
over
depressed
the
all the time.
years, what the total increase in seat has been, say, the last 5 years?
The total increase in C.
Percentage.
Only been
No,
one increase.
no,
Yeah.
there's only really been the last biennium.
Yeah.
And that was what, less than 1%?
You know what I mean?
Oh,
We need to
we
circle
need to
back
circle
to
back to the
Jefferson
Jefferson
County.
County.
Oh gosh, yes.
So the-
In fact, if we could get that, if you can find that, I can't remember where that came from.
Yeah.
The chart of seek through the years.
Yeah, it's been one of your
We've got one that was
presentations.
like for the last 4 years.
Yeah.
something we've got.
It has
You reviewed it with us for
inflation.
sure.
Yeah, we do.
It'd be great.
It's one of Charlie's PowerPoints.
Yeah. If we can circle back to the amended DFP for Jefferson County.
Yep.
And Robin, will you send that, or somebody send that, so we can circulate the board?
The seat increase,
With
The
inflation?
seek history,
Mhm.
just kind of an inflation line and a real dollar line and you know, if, what, in 92 or whenever we started seek, if that had just grown by inflation each year, what that line looks like on a graph versus the real dollars on a graph. And I have seen that graph. I don't know if it was.
I haven't seen that
I
one.
haven't.
OEA did it, or. I get- actually,
But they've got the
copied
data.
one From the House's education staff.
Okay.
Had one, but that person is gone now, so,
It'd be pretty easy to reconstruct, just looking at inflation tables. There's several tools on the internet to do that.
just have to always keep in mind as we look at it, that it's, I mean, as you know, that's not all
It's
education,
incomplete.
all education spending,
Well,
or all education.
No.
and
It's a big
pensions
number.
are,
It's a big number. There's a lot of additional money toward education, though, that doesn't flow through the
Pensions.
seat.
Oh, yeah.
it's a cool.
Well, right, it's
2
only
billion.
4,000 per student, right?
It's only 2 billion.
It's,
Isn't it only about
Change.
4,000 per student?
Not even for every
Is
district.
it 3?
And we're
Seek
like
is
on
three.
average,
yeah.
a lot more than that, 11?
Yeah,
Once
with
you-
the add-on.
Once you start factoring in like pensions and healthcare and even some of the other line items,
We've looked at this.
It's 15.
Yeah.
CTE too.
Yeah. I was-
It's a small
the
percentage
seek
of total
base.
spend.
Yeah, and really, what I was talking about for this graph is the seek base.
Okay, you just want
Just
base.
seek the
Per
4,000,
pupil.
right
Yeah,
now
the
it's
per
4,000 per
pupil.
pupil.
Okay.
Yeah, without getting it all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right,
So to go back to A2, the question was, what is the level of the board's kind of review and then approval of such items? I just looked at the statutes and the regulation, and I certainly invite the commissioner and Robin, you and your staff to jump in because you all work with these statutes day in and day out. But my review, there's no explicit statement as to whether the board's review is strictly process or procedural or more substantive, but I will say, if you look at the statutes and the reg as a whole, it contemplates that the board's role is primarily in setting the regulations around this process, and that the local districts then have to get their plans approved by the commissioner, that the commissioner is doing a very detailed review of the money, as well as whether or not all of the plan fits in accordance with all of the regulations that the board has set. And then the commissioner makes a recommendation to the board. The board ultimately then can approve. It says the board shall approve the district facility plan upon the recommendation of the commissioner. So to the extent the question was, does the board's review extend to sort of I'll call them judgment decisions about certain sites where you could decide A or you could decide B and both would be in accordance with regulation? I do not think that is what the statutes and the regulation contemplate. Rather it is, has a district facility plan been submitted, gone through in-depth review by the department and is in accordance with the board's regulations? I'd love to know if that's how you all read it.
And part of that is making sure they're complying with our planning manual
That's the regulation.
requirements.
Yes.
That's what the
Which is
reg
incorporated by
says.
reference.
So making sure that all the square footage is being met, and
Mhm.
costing out is being met, and all that. So
Mhm.
that is the way we interpret it, which is a little broader than how we've been explaining it to you about the process. But that process also includes the whole local planning manual.
The concern that I raised, Commissioner, was over the issue of whether they're spending too much on repair and not enough on new facilities, and maybe throwing good money after bad. That's, Chris Brady and I have had our differences of opinion.
Yeah. Oh,
But he raises something I think that needs to be explored when he says that we're spending more on HVAC equipment and refitting schools for HVAC than you are to build a new school in some cases, 20 million versus 16. And he just, you know, I
It wasn't
think-
just for HVAC though, that's
No, if you look at throwing everything else and it's more than 20 million.
just for HVAC?
No. But
No, well, I meant the 16 million.
But the question remains, are they throwing good money after bad? Now, obviously, there's disagreement even on their own board over this, but I'm just wondering, is that something that's in our purview? To look at the efficient use of the funds there, as opposed to just spending money to patch, which you're gonna have to throw more dollars at in a few more years.
If it's within anyone's purview, I would say the statute contemplates the commissioner raising those decisions, or those
This kind of says
questions.
the shall approve based on commissioner's recommendation.
The school construction commission, do they review these plans for the type of things that Rich is talking
No.
about?
And not-
You just take
No.
whatever the district says.
So this,
Now, let me say this really quickly. Obviously, Jefferson County is the largest district, so 163 schools in it for the last SAR. They have one nickel. What we know is that districts that have one nickel can barely maintain their facilities. And any facility, the repair cost exceed 80% of the replacement value per the regulation is supposed to be replaced. With this amended plan, they have placed, let's see, what was it? 5 elementary schools in a transitional status in order to construct 3-year schools. So from where they have been in the past few years, I view it as moving forward towards some of the
The
issues.
intent would be these places are done once they get the new skill built, so.
This is not a commitment to build.
Mhm.
This
Well,
is
it's
just,
placing them in a position to do that because you don't spend money on transitional facilities except for safety issues,
right.
okay? So I know that they looked at property for an elementary and a middle school, as well as some schools in the west end to reorganize in that area. So in my mind, they are moving forward. But with one nickel, they can only do so much.
Well, but they built all of these schools without a nickel to begin with.
That's aged infrastructure. And what they have on there primarily are HVAC and roofing projects that
Mhm.
are eligible for restricted funding after they're 15 years old.
What does that mean, restricted funding? Who's restricted funding?
SOCC, or they would be eligible to use SOCC funds to do that project is what.
What is that?
School Facility Construction Commission.
So those are state funds? Or local
They
funds?
would be eligible for it. Doesn't mean that they're
They'll
gonna.
get them.
Yeah.
And it could be a mix too,
But
their local,
instead of
their
local-
local nickel they
Yeah.
currently have, plus if they get a state match, which Jefferson County currently doesn't, because of their equalization level, but it's their local plus whatever SFCC.
But if they can do that, that's less money that they have to come up with in
Yes.
terms of bonding or anything else to fund more expensive
So does our,
projects.
But that's only for new.
so does our
Correct.
structure move them towards, doing a $16 million repair of a building versus a $20 million new building? Is there anything in our funding that would force decisions that might not in the private world make sense? You know,
Well, obviously,
that would fund repairs, but we don't fund new.
the need exceeds the local available revenue, and that's the report that will be given to the legislature later in the year. So how you deal with, you know, limited resources is really a district decision.
But was I understanding you, when you were explaining this though, in terms of what we're looking at in particular here, is that the work they're doing on these existing facilities is to keep them in some kind of shape because they have nowhere else for these kids to go until they get the new facility built, is that correct? Of what we're saying on those three in particular, that there's,
There's 163.
Right.
buildings, Laura, and a lot of them do have a lot of repair work. It's been maintenance that may have even been set aside because they didn't have the funds.
right,
So they've been identified, but they have also identified 5 schools that are in really bad shape that they
Right.
really need to replace. And they've identified replacing the 5 that are really bad with 3 new.
and all I was saying though, today though, we're just approving the amendment. Because we already approved all this other stuff a while back.
Right.
So today, we are doing the 3 transitional repairs, if you will, that will be replaced by the new kind of,
The transitional schools, they
Okay.
can't do anything.
anything with, they're not touching those.
Unless it's a life
Okay.
safety issue.
Got it.
They can't go in there and put on new classrooms or anything else, because they said, we are replacing these buildings. So that kind of.
I just wanna make sure that as
But
we're
you're-
approving the DFP, we're approving what they've amended,
You are
not the
approving-
existing.
You are approving the amendment to the
Okay,
plan.
and all I'm saying is how we missed the boat on all that other stuff that was out there that we're talking about, is my point. It was previously approved, the HVAC repairs and all the stuff
Oh,
that
that
we don't
was,
like.
Yeah, that could have been 4 years ago.
Right, exactly, so
I
today.
can't remember when the last one
Today,
was
we're
done for them,
approving
but
this
there was-
elementary school, which they clearly
Yeah,
need
it's
to
the
get rid of
amendments.
these.
It was in
So-
June of 2017 was the last.
Yeah, and I'm not saying those aren't valid points down the road, but today, the task at hand is.
Is to approve
Well,
the
and again, these are not
amendments.
commitments to do anything.
Right, no, it's just their wish list,
their
if you will,
plan.
of, right,
They, in order to do it, it has to be approved on their
Right.
plan.
right.
It doesn't mean they
Yes.
do it.
In the right priority.
And they don't have the funds to do all of it.
Oh, right, so they'll have to prioritize it themselves if they're.
I think they committed to build, was it 1 new school?
You know, we've got 3 new elementary. and-
That's on a plan, but their commitment, I think, they've only.
You mean like
committed to
an
build 1
open project?
Yeah, just this summer, so last month when they committed to build 1,
It has to be
this whole issue came up.
I don't recall having seen an open project.
It-
Maybe they're talking about it in the board.
No, they may do a forward action or something that hasn't.
But it hasn't come here yet.
So if I'm at a local, if I'm on a local district board, or administration, is it easier to acquire state funding for a major repair or a new building? Or are they both equally difficult?
It's gonna be the same, it's gonna be, when you talk about state funding, now what will happen is that we will compile a list from the most current DFPs from all the schools, or all the districts.
Which is why you're seeing so many right now.
Right.
It's always June 30th of the odd year, get ready for the budget cycle. So a lot of the districts will scurry to get a brand new DFP that identifies the current need right now. But we'll also be taking
cost.
existing DFPs and deducting off of those projects they've done and adjusting down what their needs are. We then compile all the districts with the need, less any local revenues, which would be their capital outlay, their local bonding potential, what they could do locally. And
And
then
that list includes both new and major
Right,
repairs?
yes.
Yes.
Okay,
So it's on
all
your
on the same
DFP.
list?
All big
Gotcha.
chunks in there together. Everything 1 through 4 on here is on in that total.
So they're
So-
treated the same.
Yeah. So, but now, see, but here's the thing, see, when it goes over, it's just a dollar amount. People aren't picking and choosing which projects to do. It's a dollar amount. And when the General Assembly approves a total amount of funding for school facilities, for the SFCC funding, SFCC staff will never be the full dollar amount. And what they do is they come back with this budgeted amount, and then they allocate it on a percentage basis to the districts based on what their dollar amount is of the
They
total.
requested.
So they could have
Percentage of
need,
the unmet need.
they could have need in the millions and get $500,000 as a,
Just a
oh,
percentage
it's
based
a
on these
percentage.
TFDs.
Right.
And some could be repair and some
Yep.
could be.
Right.
And so at that point, and a lot of times then what you see is that they may have huge need, but their offer of assistance is here. So that's not gonna be big enough to help them fund a big project. So they will then tend to take smaller projects in order to make use of those funds
Or they can escrow those dollars,
for future
For
use.
futures.
and then they'll get another offer the next year until they can actually do a project.
Is that the one that you just referenced, went back to 2017, that you?
Oh, no, I was just saying, that was their DOP they had originally submitted, this is just an amendment to that DOP, this isn't their regular scheduled buying, whatever it is.
But the one that goes back to 2017 hasn't been funded then apparently, it's just, it keeps recurring?
No, again, it's just like a strategic plan.
Here's-
That's all a
here's what we would
DOP
intend to
is.
do.
Here's what we'd like to do. And then they prioritize, based upon what they think is most important. They put those in priority one,
To help get to those
Mhm.
first.
and they do those first, and those are things they would
Yes,
like to
funding's
do.
available.
They would like to do in the first biennium.
Right.
So all the ones that they'd like to do in the first 2 years, once they get their money from their offers of assistance, that's what they'll have to do. And then the second priority is after that.
But again,
So-
where the legislative folks have said, hey, here's what, we're going
Here's
to
a
appropriate for
smaller
facilities,
sum
this
of
is what the
money.
software, I think the intent was for the legislature to be more versed as to the age of facilities across the Commonwealth, so
Right,
they
that's
know,
K-FIPS.
right, exactly. So they maybe have a better idea as to the true funding needs and
Mhm.
facility updates based on age, which makes sense.
And then too, then once they start getting KBE's reports,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times what they'll do is they'll have unmet need, I'm thinking of not emergency, what am I?
Urgent needs.
Thank you, urgent needs, couldn't get the word out. They will sometimes offer urgent needs funding to certain school districts that seem to have the worst buildings. that-
Got it.
And
Which would
generally
be
those
better
are
population.
replacements.
Right, like dire needs.
Yeah.
These
Right,
kids
and that
need
would be
extra school.
targeted, to Hocking County
Yeah.
building,
Right.
as far as the elementary.
Elementary school.
Got it. So, like I said on this,
So-
I think the amendment
so we do
that's
need
out
a
there, we need to,
motion.
I'll motion to approve the amendment.
I'll
as-
second.
Right.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and I think we need to adjourn, right, or whatever, anything, okay? Take a motion to.
You can't be done yet.
Motion to adjourn.
Oh, yeah, no, Gary already said, I still beat you all.
Second. All in favor?
Aye. And that curriculums look awful.